Good morning, everyone. My name is Woody Kingman, and I'm honored to represent the Blake Alumni Board and the Office of Institutional Advancement, which puts on these fine breakfasts at Blake. Welcome today. This is our last breakfast of the year. 2017-2018 was a terrific year with some really great speakers. We've already begun a neat lineup for next year, including our first one at the Minnetonka Club, September 13th, where we will get an update, State of the Union of the Blake Schools from Head of School Ann Stabney. So mark that on your calendars. And today we are just delighted to all be here and hear from Erika Dolland, class of 1998, our Young Alumna of the Year. Exactly. There she is. And here to introduce Erika is someone I hope by now is familiar to all of you, our Head of School, Dr. Ann Stabney. Since joining Blake in 2012, Ann has led many new and powerful changes across the school's 3 divisions. Ann's deep experience in and passion for developing curriculum has resulted in transformative initiatives, including our new global immersion programs. Ann has also led a deepened investment in financial assistance, helping to move the number of students who receive need-based financial aid from 205 students when she arrived to 325 students today. Pretty great. She's also championed our $80 million Excellence Accelerated campaign that recently just reached $75 million, a remarkable achievement for our school, and we hope to raise that extra $5 million from you here today before you leave. So mission accomplished. Ann's leadership and commitment to Blake is both impressive and inspiring, and I'm pleased to welcome Ann to the podium this morning.
Good morning, Woody. I'm glad to know the campaign will bring closure by the end of this morning. That's fabulous. So good morning to all of you. And it is my distinct pleasure to recognize the 2017 recipient of Blake's Young Alumni Award, Erica Dolland, Blake class of 1998. Erika joined Blake in 9th grade, and she spent her upper school years as a member of the speech and debate team and as a staff member of Flash, which is Blake's literary magazine, and also Spectrum, which is Blake's newspaper. As a junior, Erika received Blake's Wilson Speech Activities Cup. She was also Minnesota State Champion in speech. In her senior yearbook page, which I looked at earlier this week, Erika predicted her priorities and really I think her future when she stated, "I'm heading straight for the top and I'm taking my family, friends, and community with me." After graduating from Blake in 1998, Erika went on to receive her BA in Writing and Performance Studies from New York University, where she received cum laude honors. She completed her MS in Childhood Education from City College of New York. Today, Erika is a 13-year veteran in the field of international education with a wide breadth of professional experience in 21st century classroom teaching, teacher training, and school improvement in the United States, in West Africa, and also in the Middle East. Currently, she serves as head of faculty with the Abu Dhabi Ministry of Education, which has embarked on a 10-year education reform project to improve the quality of government schools to perform at international standards. Erika spearheads school-wide instruction, curricular and assessment planning, and also implementation to yield student learning success for Emirati students. Previously, she worked as a teacher trainer for the International Foundation for Education and Self-Help in Ghana, West Africa. In this role, Erika worked in collaboration with Ghana's Ministry of Education to develop and deliver continuous professional development workshops for primary school teachers in rural communities. She trained over 300 district teachers to improve teaching and learning in English, in math, and also in science. During her time in Ghana, Erika organized and supported a local women's group in forming the Agogo Women's Soap Cooperative. And this cooperative allowed poor women to generate sustainable income for themselves and also their families. Erika also served as a Teach for America teacher advisor with the New York City Summer Institute. And in this role, Erika coached teachers and led ongoing professional development for new teachers assigned to work in low-performing, underserved New York City public schools. This work impacted the future learning of more than 200 students. Erika began her career in New York City as a teaching fellow, where she worked as an inner-city elementary school teacher at PS 28 in Washington Heights, and she also worked at the Excellence Boys Charter School in Bed-Stuy-Vesant. Her strategic approach to instruction led to 100% of her grade 4 students at Lighthouse Academy in the South Bronx, which is the poorest congressional district in the country, to earn proficiency or advanced proficiency on the New York State math assessment, and also to improve their learning readiness by 2 grade levels within 1 year. So Erika, I'd love to have you join me here, please. The Young Alumni Award honors alumni who graduated from Blake in the last 20 years. It is given annually to recognize an alumna or an alumnus who has made significant contributions to civic and/or professional organizations, and who is driven by a bold sense of curiosity, openness to differences, and who constantly strives to be an engaged, courageous, and intelligent world citizen. So it is with great pride that the Blake School has played even a small role in your achievements and leadership. So we honor you today with this award. I have here a pewter bowl for you. You don't have to hold it the whole morning, but so for your commitment to bettering the environment for and access to student learning, and with a specific focus on education in West Africa, the Middle East. On behalf of Blake, I'm pleased to present you with the 2017 Young Alumni Award. It's my privilege to celebrate the meaning and purpose of your work and commitment to education. Now it's my pleasure to turn the podium over to Erika, whose talk is entitled Connecting International Education to 21st Century Outcomes. She's going to discuss her pathway from Blake to where she is today and reflect on the passion and dedication that she has to improving teaching and learning for young people around the world. So thank you, Erika.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Dr. Stevney, if there's just one thing you said that I disagreed with, you said Blake playing a small role in who I am today and the work that I'm doing. Blake actually played an immense role, and I am forever grateful for this institution and everything that it's done for me. And I'm also grateful to my parents who are here, who made the Blake investment. Mom and Dad, thank you so much for doing that. Before I get started, I just want to thank everyone who's come. I see a lot of familiar faces, people that I went to school with, as well as some of the teachers that I had when I was at Blake who made the time and effort to come. It really, really means a lot to me. I know people have other things that they could be doing with their time early on a Thursday morning, and you have decided to be here, so thank you very much. And I'm also very grateful to this award that I have been given, as well as the platform to be able to speak with you here today. And I must say, one of the perks of this award is the fact that the word young is attached to it. Because someone who is close to turning 40 and has anxieties and trepidation about it, to hear that I'm still young actually still makes me feel quite young. So thank you so much. So what I want to do today is I want to take you on a journey that travels across countries and continents in the unifying name of improving educational structures and teacher pedagogy. Pedagogy that will cultivate 21st century competencies for all students. so they are able to access social, political, and economic power in a globalized society. When I speak about competencies, I'm referring to the ability to innovate, problem solve, think critically, communicate effectively, and collaborate with others. But in this journey, over the past 12 years, I've been conflicted with more concerns than clarity and having more questions than answers. Why is a high-quality education not attainable by all children throughout the world? How can children build these competencies in the absence of basic resources and quality teaching? And what are the influences from one's social environment and culture? So just to kind of give you a framework of what I want to speak about today, some of the points that I want to touch on, I'm briefly just going to talk about how I came into education as a recent graduate from NYU. And then I'm going to talk about my first teaching experience, teaching in the New York City public schools, both in traditional public schools as well as in charter schools. And what was unique about this was I was able to see firsthand just the variance in the quality of education that is given to students and how that can affect ultimately their life trajectories, some for the better and some for the not so good. I then want to move across the Atlantic and talk about my experience working in Africa in international education. And in this position, I was moving out of the classroom and going into a role where I was developing workshops for teachers in rural areas. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about my experience right now living and working in the United Arab Emirates, where I've been there since 2011, playing a really heavy hand in the education reform that is going on there right now, which is really, really quite amazing. But first, it started on the G train. The G train is where it began. I was in my senior year at New York University, on my way to an internship in Brooklyn at a children's publishing company. Like most New Yorkers trained to avoid eye contact, I settled my gaze on an unassuming advertisement. And the advertisements looked something very similar to this. And these were actually created by the New York City Teaching Fellows Program. And the New York City Teaching Fellows Program is very similar to Teach for America in the sense that they recruit and hire recent graduates as well as career professionals who are interested in working in low-income, hard-to-staff schools for a period of 2 years. And the thing about these advertisements is they were just always very emotionally pulling and very, very visceral. And they would make you kind of stop and reflect on, what is my purpose in life? How can I serve people in a greater capacity? And the one that I saw that really, really stuck with me, it said something to the effect of, do you remember who won the Oscar for Best Actor in 1999? Do you remember or can you name one of the astronauts on the Voyager mission? Do you remember your second grade teacher's name? Now who's going to remember you? I was just like, oh wow, like that, just got me like goosebumps. I was like, I want to be remembered. So I applied for the New York City Teaching Fellows and I was accepted into the program. And after a brief an intensive 6-week teacher boot camp where I learned to lesson plan, manage a classroom, and practice teaching at an elementary school with students who failed their New York State reading and math tests, I was prepared to teach, prepared. In the fall, I was assigned to PS 28 in Washington Heights, a community with the largest Dominican population in the United States. The Title I school student population was made up of Dominican and African American students, where 96% of the student body qualified for free or reduced lunch. I was told on the first day of school by my vice principal to just keep them under control. A good teacher always keeps their students under control. What I unpacked from her words was that these kids can't learn. Don't make the effort, don't waste your time, just contain and control. The school had no standards and expectations. Students were referred to in racially coded language as thugs and criminals. Lesson plans were optional and never checked. My colleagues' assumptions about the learning capacity of students who looked like me was confirmed during my break when I'd walk the hallways observing lessons. Student learning was low level. There was no inquiry or investigation or other advanced teaching methodologies being used. What's interesting and often overlooked in the teaching and learning of urban low-income schools is the hidden curriculum embedded in instruction. A curriculum that teaches students to follow directions, take orders, and comply. embedded in routine learning practices like memorization, copying, and recall. A curriculum that openly lends itself to the cultivation of a second-class citizenship that affords people fewer life opportunities without will, without choice, but by sheer circumstance. My third grade class of 29 students was made up of children whose lives were lived in many margins. Marquita should have been in 6th grade, but failed the 3rd grade New York State reading test 3 times. Daquan started a fight with anyone who looked at him funny, and Joshima wet her pants in class, which I later learned was a symptom of sexual abuse. And Guadalupe's poor attendance was due to her mother's constant relocating to different battered women's shelters. These margins always seem to multiply, then expand, or on repeat, without notice or warning. I was up against the carried unspoken traumas of my students, yet trying to raise their level of achievement, which was typically 2 or 3 grade levels behind in reading and math. I feared my students would slip into the school-to-prison pipeline, a fear that was validated when one of my graduate school professors told me, and this is absolutely shocking, I'm sure you will find it shocking as well, that many states review the 3rd grade test scores to inform prison renovations. There were days where the interchanging of my responsibilities of being a teacher, a psychologist, a parent, and a mediator left me exhausted and numb. How were my students expected to prevail? I knew the trajectory of a child's life, especially those coming from fragile circumstances, could be shaped by the quality of his or her education and the expectations of a teacher. I had remembered Miss Lennox from my 9th grade World Cultures class at Blake, my first African American teacher. She helped me make sense of rich European history and shaped my writing skills to compose compelling structured essays. It was life-changing to have a teacher who looked like you affirm your intelligence and your existence in the space of knowledge. I so desperately wanted to do the same for my students. I didn't emerge from PS 28 as the teacher heroine I wanted to be, at least not to the standard of No Child Left Behind. Not all of my students passed their state test, and quite a few still struggled academically and emotionally. I always believed that there was more I could and should have done. But then again, how does one measure impact, especially when the competencies that my students were owning every single day of their life was grit and survival? The New York City public school system had weighed me down, disillusioned and nearly broken me. How could a public institution fail the most vulnerable? How could schools with a track record of years and years of failure go unnoticed and unchecked? What was a quality education when it came to educating other people's children? My trust and faith in the public education, the bedrock of any democratic society, was bleak. So I decided to take a second chance. Charter schools were beginning to emerge in New York City as the solution to failing traditional public schools, promising families a high-quality education with accountable results. Excellence Boys Charter School in Bed-Stuy was unique in its vision and student body. The all-boys school educated a student population of 100% African American males who were bus, carpool, train ride in, whatever it took from Brooklyn's most impoverished communities. I was the founding teachers of what many considered a timely social experiment. The school prided itself on a teaching and learning approach where Black intelligence was celebrated and centralized. Student-led African drumming, open morning assembly. Classrooms were named and decorated with the names of historically Black colleges and Ivy League schools. Students were affirmed constantly, being told that they were brilliant and special. And similar to Blake, college wasn't an option, it was an expectation. And I stand here today proud to announce that 4 of my former grade 1 students are freshmen at the University of Pennsylvania, Harvard University, Howard University, and Wesleyan College. These young boys, soon to be men, came of age within a school environment that helped them access the power of their own self-worth and greatness, despite the destructive characterization and social imagining of Black male bodies as dangerous and criminal. After 3 years of working in the urban public education, I was ready for a new challenge. I was eager to see the experience how the climate of international education compared with the American education system. What I knew for sure from working in the New York City public schools is that an educator's mindsets, beliefs, and skills could inform student success and drive impactful change in teaching and learning. With that zeal for international education experiences, I set out for Ghana. I worked with the International Foundation for Education and Self-Help. The organization operates from the premise that in order for emerging democracies to be sustained in sub-Saharan Africa, a country's citizens must be literate. Education and training are the cornerstones of economic and social reform. I worked for 2 years with Ghana's Ministry of Education as a teacher trainer in small rural towns. My first year, I lived and worked on the campus of Abatifi's Teachers Training College in the eastern region of Ghana, and my second year at the Agogo Women's Teacher Training College in the Ashanti region. In Ghana, students who aspire to become teachers enroll in teacher training colleges located throughout the country for 3 years, and then leave for 1 year of student practicum at a local primary or secondary school before receiving a basic teacher diploma. The Ministry of Education's intent is to advance a pedagogy that centralizes the teacher in the classroom and make learning more student-centered and hands-on focused. I saw the immediate need for reform in my early visits to primary school classrooms, observing 10 to 15-year veteran teachers. In lessons, children even as young as 4 years old would sit at their desk while a teacher stood at the chalkboard and used a say and repeat approach to making learning stick. There was never any accessing prior knowledge, think, pair, share, play-based learning, differentiation, and other modern teaching methodologies I learned from graduate school. In fact, observing this teaching style in the context of a post-colonial African society made me think of Paulo Freire's book, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Freire references a specific teaching and learning model called banking, typical in the education systems of colonized societies. Students are filled as empty containers with information only to be tested to see how much leaked out. This in turn reinforces a lack of critical thinking and co-creation of knowledge, which only stimulates oppressive attitudes and structures in society. It made me wonder how equitable and caring of a world is being created when the most marginalized are denied participation. It was clear a lack of student resources and an understanding of how to create and use them were major factors in teachers using an oral teaching methodology. Classrooms were only equipped with desks and a chalkboard, as you can see in the pictures over here. And over the course of 2 years, I led teacher training workshops on student-centered learning and creating resources for over 400 teachers from throughout the Eastern and Ashanti regions. So this is actually some pictures from the actual workshops that were held at the teacher training colleges that was done about twice a month, and they were a full day, so the teachers would come and we'd spend a full day making resources. I always tried to make sure that they were very hands-on and that my mode of delivery was something that they could take back and replicate in their classroom. So it wasn't me just lecturing, but it was people talking with each other, working in pairs, and it was just so nice to see the teachers so excited and having this epiphany that, you know, wow, if we can have fun with learning, why can't our students as well? And these are examples of some of the resources that were made. I always made it a point to make sure that during the workshops that teachers actually had something that they could take back to their classrooms. And I also made it a point to make sure that items that I sourced to make some of these materials were things that I could find in the community, such as a cereal box or a can or a plastic bag. But I really wanted to see that teaching and learning materials wasn't something that had to be purchased, but it was actually something that could be made and equally effective. My work assignments limited me to the southern part of the country, where I would travel to more remote areas of the country to gauge the quality of education. In Tamale, the capital city of the northern region, I saw the direct dual impact of poverty and patriarchy in the low enrollment of girls in school. The northern region of Ghana is extremely poor and far below the living conditions of the southern part of the country. Few industries exist in the north, with most people making a meager living from subsistence farming, raising livestock, and working in local markets. To supplement wages and reduce expenses, including hefty school fees, families depend on the labor activity of the girl child, which in turn impacts the low enrollment of girls in school and a higher dropout rate. And some of the other factors too that deter girls from going to school is the long distance that a lot of times students have to walk to get to school. And there's always a heightened sense of fear that something might happen to the female students. Also, the held traditional beliefs that women are only meant to procreate and be at home is another big issue that I found throughout the northern region. And also, something that was quite prevalent was sexual harassment that the girls could face from male students or also their teachers. And when I was at the training colleges, I actually saw that quite a bit, where quite a few of the female teachers would come to me and tell me about students who were having sexual relations with the professors, and they didn't necessarily feel empowered to be able to say no, or that they didn't want to comply. These repeated encounters affirmed my privilege of education and nationality over and over again. I wanted to do more. I had to engage with my community and reach out to women and girls. My love for reading and writing intersected when I formed a creative writing class for primary school girls in Abu Tifi. Teachers from local schools selected girls to participate in the weekly class where we read poetry and short stories from female African writers and created our own. And this was actually a reading that we had towards the end of my time working with the project. And the girls were able to invite family members and community members to come and listen to some of the writing that they had composed. And they just really loved it. It was so nice to take them out of the learning context of this rote kind of standard learning that they were getting in the classroom, and really opening the doors to imagination and creation and exposing them to local writers that they had never heard of before. And as I spoke of before, it was hard initially to get the girls to be able to even come because their families were dependent on them being at home and doing work to get ready for market. So one of the ways that I incentivized the girls as well as their families is that I provided them with a snack. And the families really loved that because it was a mouth that had been fed earlier in the day. My strolls in Agogo exposed me to the daily interplay of problem solving and collaboration among people out of the sheer necessity for survival. I saw how creative output was metabolized for economic generation. One day I noticed a group of women selling ashy-colored balls covered in waxing paper on the side of the road, which I later learned was soap made from burnt cocoa husks. And for many of you who don't know this, Ghana is actually the second largest exporter of cocoa in the world. So people will tend to try to be very creative with using cocoa for entrepreneurship activities. The money these women made from making and selling the soap supported their families' livelihoods and children's school fees, but they wanted to do more and felt hindered in their productivity with worn down and aged equipment. I led a fundraising to buy updated equipment and connected the women to a marketing professor at Accra University to receive business counseling. The success of the women's cooperative drew the attention of the chief of Agogo. Impressed by their efforts and understanding the social magnitude of women economic generation, he provided them with a plot of land to produce the soap. Ghana schooled me on what defines and determines intelligence, in that it wasn't something solely to be cultivated and measured within a classroom, but achieved out of necessity for survival. My career up to this point pivoted on working within marginalized communities and trying to identify and improve the impediments to teaching and learning that debilitated student development. What fascinated me about the United Arab Emirates was understanding and experiencing what education reform looks like in one of the wealthiest countries in the world. What is a reform's function and purpose when students and educators already occupy an economically privileged existence? The United Arab Emirates, one of the richest countries in the world and 47 years old, is heavily investing in reforming its education system to produce a knowledge-based society on a global level. The country is operating from the foresight that its economy can no longer continue to be oil dependent. The resource is slowly depleting and countries are turning to alternative sources. To maintain its socioeconomic prominence and expand its presence on the world stage, the country has set forth an ambitious agenda known as the UAE's 2021 vision, under the leadership of His Highness Sheikh Khalifa. One of the key goals of the vision is for the Emirati students to rank among the best and the brightest in the world in reading, math, and science international exams. Just to give you a snapshot of how schools are laid out, public education is free for all Emirati students. They have Cycle 1, Cycle 2, Cycle 3 schools, which is like our elementary, middle school, and high school. Schools are single sex, starting at grade 1 to grade 12. And in the primary schools, children learn English, math, science, social studies, Islamic studies, Arabic, art, sport, and design technology. There's a very strict code of conduct in teaching and learning to assure that there are no violations against Islam. For example, teachers cannot make reference to magic or pigs. Dice and playing cards cannot be used as resources in teaching math. Holidays are not to be mentioned or discussed, and books cannot show boys and girls holding hands. Also, women are allowed to teach at both the boys' and the girls' schools, where the men can only teach at the boys' schools. And the standard form of dress for women is an abaya, which is what I have on. And because the government has a keen interest in its people attaining college-level degrees, it pays for the full tuition of all of its students to study in foreign universities. Since 2009, the country's education reform has undergone many reincarnations in both strategies and names to achieve this goal. The New School Model, the New School Reform, Education First. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been invested in recruiting and hiring educators from English-speaking countries, administrators, curriculum czars, and consultants, equipping schools with the latest technology, customizing textbooks to align with UAE culture and international standards. And its most recent version, the reform is placing a focus on standardization and requiring schools to operate within a homogeneous framework known as the Emirati school model. I work on the ground level to ensure the ministry's vision is executed within the schools. My day-to-day responsibilities include creating and leading staff development training that aligns with improving students' 21st century competencies for Western and Emirati teachers, guiding school senior leadership teams in developing school improvement plans and targets based on feedback from the biannual school inspection reports, and also designing data collection frameworks to support educators and leaders in making data-driven decisions. I also work with the curriculum department as a pedagogical support specialist, where I created and standardized literacy content documents for primary school teachers. The reform isn't without its challenges and setbacks. Are international assessments accurate indicators for success for English second language learners? Can a vision manifest when there is a disconnect between the goal of those in executive government leadership and the actions of those at the ground level? I've shared with you 4 distinct educational experiences, so let me summarize by telling you where I think these educational approaches are in achieving successful progress for the 21st century. From New York to Ghana to Abu Dhabi, there is an expressed interest by each government and its citizens that education is a priority. Each has approached the furtherance of its education in its own and unique way. We clearly see public education in the United States as an quagmire. Differences exist between states and federal governments' roles and expectations. Charter schools versus non-charter schools, armed violence, teacher strikes, and the decline of student academic performance. There are some charter school successes and there are some non-charter school successes, but combined, they are inadequately preparing all students for a winning outcome. In Ghana, we see a poor country trying to pull itself up by its bootstraps with the support of international NGOs, but it still isn't enough. The high concentration of poverty in rural areas of the country, coupled with the growing number of students, thanks to the waiving of basic school fees in 2010, the country is forced to hire teachers without a diploma in basic education to meet the demand. Recent national assessment data suggests that less than 40% of students in basic schools are proficient in math and English. I'm confident that some of the government's recent proposed changes, such as the increase in teacher salaries and incentivizing those teachers who choose to teach in rural areas, will have some impact. The UAE has the financial and human resources to implement the government's educational vision. It has hired and compensates generously world-class education professionals and teachers, primarily from English-speaking countries. Based on international assessment data from 2016, the country is well on target to meeting its performance goals. The country will continue to be a model of education reform in the Middle East, with countries such as Qatar and Kuwait following suit. Everyone in this room can contribute to educational progress. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, everyone can be great because anybody can serve. By becoming an advocate, joining your school board, donating to teachers using in need of resources on donorschoose.com, and volunteering like my parents do. So let's work for the quality of education for all children. It's just the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There was a lot there, but I'm sure there's still some questions that you may have. Anyone want to bounce one off of Erika? Fine gentleman who's never asked a question before.
I feel so privileged.
You're doing a beautiful job of having us all join with you in the thought that each and every child can have a life. And you're showing the way in which it can be done. Your example is marvelous. How does this get broadcast throughout the world?
That's a great question. I mean, I think when you look at the social media platforms that is so common that people are using to get information and to spread awareness, I think could be utilized more effectively in terms of promoting a lot of the work that's being done in these countries, and also people on the ground who are committing themselves to improve the education conditions of places everywhere. But you know, with Facebook and Instagram, which I use quite a bit, you know, I have people fielding questions asking me about, Erika, tell me more about what you're doing. What can I do to get involved? This is very interesting. I didn't know about that. So on my end, that's a platform that I'm making use of to really impact and continue and further the work that I'm trying to do.
See that American schools moving into some of these countries and establishing schools there can have a role?
Erika, can you repeat that question?
Could you say a little bit louder?
If schools that are foreign schools to the UAE could have a role by establishing schools there.
Oh, I definitely think so. I mean, Abu Dhabi, the presence of private schools there is pretty voluminous. I mean, there's quite a bit. I'm not familiar if there is American private schools there, but I know that the UK and Canada have a strong footprint in the UAE and bringing some of these private schools forward. And local parents, Emiratis who have quite a bit of money, are taking advantage of them. So yeah, I don't see why there can't be more of an opportunity of the US to do the same, which I think ties into some of the work that you want to do. So yeah, definitely.
What areas of modernized reform that you are seeing in other international countries like the UAE, but would be good to use here in America to help with modernizing our educational?
Yeah. You know, my experience working here in the US, like I said, was working in the New York City public schools. So the standard in which I was seeing on a day-to-day basis and was expected to perform to was extremely, extremely low level. So that would probably be my reference point. But what I see going on in the UAE, like I said, is the government really investing in bringing forth critical thinking in the classroom. That's a really, really big focus, and innovation, and really trying to bring a lot of depth to the teaching of outcomes so that students aren't able to just necessarily regurgitate what they've learned, but really being able to apply it. And you know, I think that's something that we could focus on in the US is not so much just the learning of knowledge, but really the application of knowledge. And you know, Miss Stephanie, one thing that, you know, I talked to my sister about having gone to Blake, and we always talk about is what we loved about our Blake education, that it was so it was just so rich, and it had so much depth, and it really got us, thinking beyond just, recall, but really being able to apply and discern and develop our critical thinking skills, which is just so pertinent and necessary, that I see so many kids deprived of those skills in the U.S., specifically in the urban schools. Yes? Yeah.
Okay. Last year I helped my granddaughter with a report, and we chose the United Arab Emirates, where we found that 19% of the population were citizens. And all of this education, all of these wonderful services are only being provided to citizens. So this sounds absolutely wonderful what they're doing, but there are a heck of a lot of people in the United Arab Emirates who are not benefiting from all of these wonderful
Right,
services.
and if I was representing the government, my response to that would be we are invested 100% in our people. And you're absolutely right, there are so many other students who could benefit from that, Egyptians, Jordanians, who are oftentimes left out in services and opportunities that the locals are able to receive. But that's where their emphasis is they are focusing just on Emiratis and wanting Emiratis to be the best and the brightest. And like I said, they are even willing to pay the full tuition of students to study abroad, to get a college degree. I mean, not just the tuition, they also get housing. The government pays for their housing. They also get an allowance. I mean, it's amazing. But you're right, the government's focus is on focusing on Emiratis, but you're absolutely right, there are kids who are left out.
Any other questions? I always get to ask the last, which is
Thank
kind of fun. You talk in the United Arab Emirates about the quality of education for women and others. What about socially, and maybe you can talk about the region a little bit well. After a university degree, 22, 23-year-old women, how are their roles in society? What's open to them? Is anything still closed to them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. The country is very, very progressive in terms of opportunities for women. And like I said, education, furthering your education is not just for male students, but it's also for female students. And one of my actually very good friends is an Emirati, and we talk quite a bit about women's issues, but I think in the government itself, I believe 60% of those positions are actually filled by women. You actually have quite a bit of female entrepreneurship too in the country, where the government is also funding female entrepreneurs to develop projects that they're interested in. So it's, compared to its neighbors, I would say that the UAE is far, far ahead in terms of advancing women, and it's very much a part of the government agenda.
Wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, 2017 Young Alumna of the Year, Erica Dolland. You were terrific. Take your bowl. So thank you. Oh, wow. Thank you. Thanks so much. That was just great. Thanks everyone for joining us today, and join us on September 13th. Put it in your calendar where we will hear from our head of school, Ann Stabney. Have a great summer. Thanks so much.